Welcome to the Deep Dive. We grab a stack of sources, cut through the noise, and really get you up to speed on what's shaping our world. Today, we've got a fascinating mix. Major legislative fights, big shifts in the job market, and, well, some pretty serious international tensions. Our mission, like always, is to pull out the key insights, the surprising facts, so you're truly informed, without getting totally swamped.
Exactly. And what's really interesting today is how these three different areas connect or seem separate, but maybe aren't. We'll unpack how big laws get through the Senate, those tricky procedural rules. Then we'll look at government cost-cutting and what that actually means for jobs, particularly for consultants. And finally, that critical situation between Israel and Iran. The U.S. has a big decision coming up. It's fascinating how these seemingly disparate things can show these underlying currents, ways you might not expect.
Okay, let's dive into that first one then. This huge piece of legislation, President Trump's mega bill. It seems to have hit a bit of a wall in the Senate. We're hearing about the Senate Parliamentarian Elizabeth MacDonough stepping in. Now, for people who don't follow the Capitol Hill minutiae every day, what exactly does the parliamentarian do? Why is this role so important right now?
Right. So think of the parliamentarian as the Senate's referee for the rules, the official interpreter. McDonough ruled that several key parts of this megabill violate something called the Byrd Rule. Now, this rule is crucial. It's designed specifically to keep policy changes that don't really affect the budget out of these special reconciliation bills. Reconciliation is that fast-track process, right? Lets bills pass with just a simple majority, avoids the filibuster.
Ah, okay. So it's a budget tool, basically.
Exactly. And the Byrd Rule says if a provision is more about policy than directly changing spending or revenue, it doesn't belong in reconciliation. It gets struck. And that's precisely what happened here with several provisions.
And these weren't small things getting knocked out, were they? We're talking billions in proposed cuts aimed at, well, some key financial oversight bodies. Like one big one was capping funding for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, essentially defunding it. And it's worth remembering, the CFPB came out of the Dodd-Frank Act after the 2008 crisis, a big democratic reform. Beyond that, the parliamentarian also nixed language-cutting Fed staff pay, funding for the Office of Financial Research, and even getting rid of the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board entirely.
Yeah, significant chunks. And the impact wasn't just on finance. The Byrd Rule rulings hit environmental policies, too. Things under the Environment and Public Works Committee, like repealing parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, funding authorizations specifically, also getting rid of those EPA emission standards for cars and trucks, model year 2027 and later. That's out. And even a defense-related item, a provision under the Armed Services Panel that would cut DoD appropriations if they didn't submit spending plans on time. Also out.
Okay, so quite a wide range of things affected. And the political reaction, I imagine, was pretty swift.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I saw Senator Jeff Merkley, the Democrat from Oregon. He was quick to comment. Called the bill Republicans one big, beautiful betrayal. Said Democrats are just making sure the rules get followed. So what's the immediate next step? Senate Republicans have that 53-47 majority. What are their options now?
Well, they basically have two choices. They can either take those provisions out of the bill to comply with the ruling.
Okay.
Or, and this is the much harder path, they'd need to find 60 votes to essentially overrule the parliamentarian on the floor via a point of order.
60 votes seems like a very tall order in today's Senate.
It usually is, yes.
Yeah.
Now, technically, the Majority Leader, John Thune, could use a simple majority to override the parliamentarian and set a new precedent, kind of the nuclear option for procedure.
Right.
But he's already signaled he doesn't plan to do that.
So it sounds like those provisions are likely out unless something major changes. What's the big takeaway here for us watching this?
I think what's really fascinating is how these deeply technical, almost arcane Senate rules, Byrd Rule here, can fundamentally change the shape of major legislation. It decides what policies even get a chance to become law through this specific process. And it highlights the, frankly, immense power of one non-elected official, the parliamentarian, in shaping these huge political battles. It's not always the elected officials holding all the cards,
That's a great point. Power isn't always obvious. Okay, so we've seen how these internal DC rules play out.
Yeah.
But government actions can also have really direct, tangible effects on the economy,
Well.
hitting people's livelihoods. Let's shift gears now. Let's talk about government cost cutting and its impact on the job market, specifically for private government consultants.
Right. This is a significant story. We're seeing thousands of these private consultants who were laid off during what the sources describe as the Trump administration's cost-cutting drive, now entering a job market that's, well, shrinking for them. It's creating a real challenge for a lot of folks in that sector.
And the data seems to back this up quite starkly. Lightcast, the labor market analytics firm, looked at job postings at some big consulting companies. Specifically, companies singled out by the GSA, the General Services Administration, for contract cuts. Their job postings are down, about 27% since 2023, and down about 11% just from a year ago.
Yeah, those are big drops.
We're talking major firms like Booz, Allen Hamilton, Deloitte. Both announced cuts this quarter, and their job openings were way down compared to last year, thousands fewer. And it's not just the contractors feeling this pinch, right? Direct federal hiring is down too.
That's right. Federal government employment itself actually shrank by 22,000 jobs in May alone. Since January, that's 59,000 federal jobs lost. And that figure doesn't even include people on paid leave or severance.
Wow. And then there were those buyout deals too. About 75,000 federal workers took an initial buyout, with potentially more in another round.
Exactly. So it's a significant contraction. And you see it reflected in recruitment. Companies like Beacon Hill, they specialize in staffing. They report a, quote, noticeable increase in job seekers coming from the federal space looking for new roles. And just to give a sense of scale, there were roughly 4.6 million contract workers tied to the federal government at the start of this year. Compare that to about 2.4 million direct federal employees. If you exclude military, postal service, census workers, it's a huge workforce.
So the impact is potentially massive. Is it concentrated anywhere geographically?
Definitely. Washington, D.C., unsurprisingly, feels it most. It has the largest concentration of federal workers and contractors. Job postings there were down 17% in April compared to just back in January.
Okay.
And the biggest drops were in roles like administrative assistants, HR, accounting, very traditional support roles. Management consulting jobs specifically in the D.C. metro area fell 28% just between February and May.
Okay, that paints a picture of, a shrinking market. But is it completely stagnant? Are there any bright spots or new demands emerging?
That's the really interesting twist here. While overall hiring is down, the sources emphasize it's not non-existent. What's happening is a shift in demand. Companies are now actively, really aggressively looking for people with skills in artificial intelligence. AI.
Ah, okay. The AI wave.
Exactly. And this might explain a seeming contradiction in the broader data. Professional and business services added 171,000 job openings between March and April.
Even with cuts.
Even while shedding 82,000 jobs in that same period. So churn, but also targeted hiring. We see companies like Accenture, IBM actually hiring more than last year. And outside the direct federal contracting space, there's still strong demand for talent in areas like healthcare, cybersecurity, AI, machine learning. Those are hot.
So whether you're someone caught in these shifts or just watching the economy, what's the key insight from this deep dive on jobs?
I think what's truly striking is how quickly one part of the economy tied to government spending can contract.
Right.
While another part, driven by technological innovation like AI, just explodes almost simultaneously. It really underscores how rapidly skills needs are changing, and the absolute necessity of being adaptable in today's job market. Government policy plays a huge role, sure, but these big tech waves are powerful shapers too.
Adaptability is key. Okay, from the individual level navigating job changes, let's zoom way out now, to a geopolitical situation with incredibly high stakes. The escalating conflict between Israel and Iran, and a potential major decision looming for the U.S.
Yeah, this is a very tense situation. The conflict has been active for 7 days now, with both sides launching attacks.
Yeah.
Serious escalation. It kicked off last Friday, reportedly with a surprise wave of Israeli airstrikes.
Yeah.
Targets included Iranian nuclear sites, military facilities, top generals, even nuclear scientists.
And the human cost.
Reports from a Washington-based Iranian human rights group suggest it's been significant in Iran. At least 657 people killed, including over 260 civilians and more than 2,000 wounded.
And Iran's response?
Iran retaliated fiercely, fired around 450 missiles and about 1,000 drones towards Israel. Now, Israel's air defenses, that multi-layered system, intercepted most of them, but not all. Reports indicate at least 24 people killed in Israel and hundreds wounded.
And there have been some really alarming specific incidents reported, too,
Yeah.
like Iranian missiles hitting a major hospital at Beersheba that wounded, 240 people?
That's right. Now, Iran denies targeting the hospital. They claim the intended target was a military tech park about 3 kilometers away. And an Israeli official did acknowledge there wasn't specific intelligence suggesting Iran planned to hit the hospital itself, but the impact was devastating regardless.
And there was also that report about an Iranian missile using cluster munitions, small bomblets spreading over a wide area.
Yes, that was reported as well. Extremely dangerous munitions.
Meanwhile, Israel's attacks have continued, hitting Iran's nuclear program again, even reaching cities like Rasht.
Correct. The strikes are ongoing. Which brings us to the U.S. position. President Trump has stated he'll decide within 2 weeks, so a pretty tight deadline, whether the U.S. military gets directly involved.
What kind of involvement are we talking about?
Well, one option reportedly being weighed is striking Iran's Fordo uranium enrichment facility. This is a major site, heavily defended, buried deep under a mountain. It's thought to be reachable only by America's most powerful bunker buster bombs, a very significant potential step.
Wow, okay, that's serious military consideration. But is there any diplomatic track still open? Is anyone trying to de-escalate?
There does seem to be a new diplomatic effort underway, potentially. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araqi, is apparently preparing to go to Geneva. Meetings planned with the EU's top diplomat and counterparts from the UK, France, and Germany, the E3 powers.
Okay, and what are allies saying?
The UK Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, met with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff. After that meeting, Lammy said, quote, "A window now exists within the next 2 weeks to achieve a diplomatic solution."
2 weeks. That matches Trump's decision timeline.
It does, and it's notable because earlier, just last Sunday, previous indirect talks between the U.S. and Iran were reportedly canceled. So this suggests maybe a renewed push.
Does this diplomatic push feel like it has a real chance, given how heated things are? What's really at the core of this conflict, especially regarding the nuclear issue?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? At its heart are these deep-seated fears about nuclear ambitions. Iran insists its program is peaceful, but it's enriching uranium up to 60% purity. That's, technically very close to the 90% needed for weapons.
Right, the short step.
While Israel is widely believed to have nuclear weapons, the only country in the Middle East, but maintains a policy of ambiguity, never confirming it, Israeli strikes have targeted key Iranian nuclear sites, Natanz, Isfahan, centrifuge workshops, missile launchers. Destroying those launchers apparently did reduce the number of Iranian attacks later on.
And they also hit that Iraq heavy water reactor.
Yes, specifically targeting Iraq seems aimed at preventing Iran from producing plutonium, which is another pathway to a bomb, separate from enriched uranium. Under the 2015 nuclear deal, Iran was supposed to redesign Iraq to prevent plutonium production, but that work wasn't finished. And after President Trump withdrew the U.S. from that deal in 2018, Iran apparently bought extra parts for the original design, so the concerns remain very active.
And the rhetoric from both sides sounds incredibly sharp.
Extremely. Iran's supreme leader rejected any talk of surrender to the U.S., warning that American military involvement would cause irreparable damage. The Iranian parliament speaker, Kalibov, accused Trump of delusion, saying you can't impose peace through war and threats.
And on the Israeli side?
Also very strong words. Defense Minister Israel Katz issued threats towards Ayatollah Khamenei himself. Prime Minister Netanyahu was a bit more measured towards the U.S., saying he trusted Trump to do what's best for America, while noting the U.S. was already helping a lot.
So pulling this all together, what's the essential takeaway from this really complex and dangerous situation?
I think this deep dive really lays bare the sheer complexity and the immediate danger of these kinds of international conflicts. You have military strikes, frantic diplomatic efforts, deep nuclear proliferation concerns, all tangled together. The stakes are incredibly high, not just regionally, but globally. Understanding the nuances, the stated positions, the fears on all sides as presented in these sources is just critical.
Absolutely critical. Wow, what a journey today. We went from the intricacies of Senate procedure and how they shape huge laws to the very real impact of government policy on jobs and the rise of AI, and then landed in the middle of this incredibly tense, fast-moving conflict between Israel and Iran, with the U.S. facing a monumental decision.
Yeah, we really covered ground. We saw how a single ruling from a parliamentarian can redirect a massive bill, how government budget choices create ripples, maybe even waves, through whole sectors of the economy, and how delicate that balance of international relations is, how quickly it can shift based on one event or even just a 2-week deadline for a decision.
And hopefully having this deeper context empowers you, our listener, to see beyond just the daily headlines. So for your final thought today, chew on this. We talked about legislative power, economic power, military power. How do these different forms of power interact? How do they influence each other in ways we might not immediately see? And think about how a change in one area, maybe a shift in interest rates, or a sudden diplomatic breakthrough, or even a technological leap, how could that unexpectedly change the game in the other domains? Lots to keep exploring.